Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you to another video. And in this video, I have Jenga Mwendo. Welcome to my platform.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yes, I am Jenga Mwendo. I worked as a modeler at Blue Sky Studios for about 7 years. It's been a while since I've touched Maya or any computer animation software, but I really enjoyed my time there, and very happy to talk about it in the industry.
Nice. So my first question is, where are you from and how was it growing up?
So I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, which is where I live now.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the 80s and early 90s. And that was right when, computer animation was first like starting to pop off. So I remember growing up, like when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after high school, like I knew that I wanted to do something that was interesting, and that was, I just felt like this was like this new innovative field, and I was fascinated with it. And also I wanted to make money. I didn't want to be broke, to be honest. And that was one of the reasons why I chose this career. And I used to watch this show called Movie Magic.
Nice.
That used to come on. It was a weekly show that came on, I think the Discovery Channel or something like that. And it would break down like how movies were made. And some of the episodes would include like computer animation effects. And I was so fascinated. I was like, how do you make, this doesn't exist in reality, but yet we're creating it for movies. So I just wanted to be a part of that. And so that's why I started to pursue the field, the computer animation industry.
So what about some other stuff you did growing up? Like, how was it just being from New Orleans?
Oh, like just regular life stuff.
Yeah.
It was cool. So I grew up, my family or my parents and their peers. So I grew up in the 80s. My parents were were part of the Black liberation movement. My parents raised us in a very like an Afrocentric household, part of the Afrocentric community in New Orleans. They and their peers started an African-centered school here in New Orleans called Ahidiana, that I attended along with like a lot of my cousins and and other peers. So I think we had a very unique kind of New Orleans experience. My name Jenga is a Swahili word that means to build. So it's kind of interesting that I ended up becoming a modeler.
Yeah.
A builder, a digital builder. So we had, just a very kind of unique, I think, growing up experience. There was a really strong but small, African, like Afrocentric community, here in New Orleans. So I remember, just going to a lot of different like types of community events, especially like around Kwanzaa. We do these big like, community events at the Treme Center, mostly, in New Orleans. Community Book Center was a place that we would, go a lot. It was great. I lived between the Lower Ninth Ward and New Orleans East. We kind of, went back and forth. And then, graduated high school. I went to McMain and to NOCA, New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts, for visual art. And graduated in 1995 and left. And I actually didn't intend, to come back to New Orleans, but ultimately I returned.
So what was your journey in art and animation during your childhood? Did you draw a lot? Like, what was your journey?
Yeah, I was always drawing. I remember when I was very little, like one of the first, when I really started getting into a lot of drawing, I would draw mermaids a lot. The two things I remember, like when I got older, I looked back at some of the things I drew when I was a kid, and I was obsessed with mermaids, and I was obsessed with like large families living in small spaces. So I would draw like these tiny, I'd draw like these floor plans and like these houses, and just figure out ways to fit people in them. Like I would draw like a family of like 9 people and fit into like this tiny like 2 or 3 room house. I don't know if that was some like psychological stuff that I was working out, you know. But that's what I would do. I would draw like these really large families, and I would give them all names and where they would sleep and who, you know, I don't know. But I was always drawing. My brother and I had this comic strip. We called it, it was Fat Daddy and Greasy Jean. And we would draw like, it was like, you know, of course they would always, you know, every episode, you know, they would get into some, you know, some trouble, and then they had to, you know, solve a problem or whatever. But we really enjoyed doing that together. Yeah, so I was always drawing, and then my mom was always very supportive of that. Like she was really good with identifying what each of us was really interested in, and just trying to encourage and support us to do that. So she's actually the one who convinced me to apply to NOCA, to the New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts. I didn't think I was good enough. But she was like, Jenga, just do it, you know, try. She would always tell me, let them tell you no, you know, basically don't tell yourself no, let them, you know, let them tell you no. So I applied, and they actually put me in level 2, which was, so there's 4 levels, you know, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So when you first apply, like the ground level is level 1. When I applied, they put me in level 2, and I was surprised. I was like, I guess I am good at something, you know. So yeah, so I started you know, going to NOCA from there, and that was a really just a wonderful experience, because you're, it's like you're surrounded by all these other talented kids who are your age. So they had not only the visual artists, but also, you know, creative writing, music, of course. Like a lot of famous musicians have come out of NOCA, like, you know, Wynton Marsalis, Harry Connick Jr., Jason Marsalis. Probably a lot of Irvin Mayfield, you know, a lot of people have come out of NOCA. And then also they had theater, of course. I don't think what else they had, but it was just really nice, you know, just to be surrounded by all these other people with, you know, with their talent that they were pursuing. So that was a really good environment, and it helped kind of encourage me to see art, you know, something related to art as a future career. And so, yeah, so I felt confident in pursuing it. And also just having the support of my mother, I think was huge.
So when you went to NOCA, was it still like a part-time school, or had they transitioned into the full?
Yeah, at that time, NOCA, you only went half day, and it was only for your art. So you went to your primary school, you know, half the day, and you did all your academics. And then the other part of the day, you would go, you know, to NOCA and do all your art training. And that was right before, I think in like the late 90s maybe, was when it sort of expanded to the new campus. So we were at the old campus. The old campus was uptown on Perrier Street.
Okay.
In this like busted building. It was like old and falling apart. And it was such, like, I remember the dancers. So the art, so you would go in the building, you walk up the stairs, and that was like the first floor. And all the arts kids, you know, were on that floor. And I think there was some creative writing on that floor. And then for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to put the dancers on top of us, you know? So we would be in our class, and we would hear like this bumping, you know, this thumping on the ceiling, because that was the dancers. They were dancing above us. But yeah, it was just, I think they just found, you know, a large building to you know, house a school. And then, you know, once the state, I won't say took control, but there was an agreement, I think, to expand NOCA into a state school. The state funding, they were able to find a new campus and build like this really amazing kind of, you know, state-of-the-art campus right on the river. But I didn't go there. I went to the school on Perrier Street, which was a great experience still. And my daughter actually now goes to NOCA.
Nice.
Visual art, which is really interesting. And they've expanded now too. Now they have culinary arts there. They have media arts. They have, I think, theater, like production, you know, if you're interested in building sets and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a great place. A lot of resources for young people.
I tried to get something 3D started there. I just taught like a little 3-part class there, and that it was kind of like a one and done. I was like, oh, okay.
It's so interesting. Like when I first moved back, so after Katrina, I decided to quit when Katrina hit, that was sort of my, cut. I was like, I'm done with computer animation. I'm gonna go back home, figure out what I'm doing, what my purpose is or what I'm doing with my life. But I thought I would try to make some money using skills that I already had, and I was really surprised at what seemed like a lack of interest in computer animation. I'm like, for me, I'm like, these kids, like, so computer animation was a really low barrier, or there's a low bar to entry because you don't have to have a degree. All you have to do is have skills. You have to have a good reel and probably some good connections. And so I was like, I really want to figure out a way to teach kids. I did reach out to NOCA, and they were kind of like, oh, that's cute. That's kind of what I felt the response was. They're like, oh, that's so cute that that you worked in computer animation. That's nice. It seemed like they didn't really want, and then I'll reach out to this other school on the West Bank, Algiers Technical High School, I think it's called something like that.
Yeah.
They had all the equipment. They had like the state-of-the-art computer lab with graphic software. And I'm like, we could do so much together, but it just.
Yeah. I spoke at ATA, and then I think some lady at Warren Easton had contacted me for something, but that didn't go anywhere either. I don't know. Traditional education and animation is just like does not work. I don't know.
Yeah.
But even when you do it, it's like it's annoying because they try to do all these like certifications, and as you said, you just need a good portfolio. What is these certifications? Because I took the Maya certification test in 2012. I took the 2012 one in 2013. I'm like, this don't mean nothing. Like you pass it, and you still ain't good at 3D. Like,
yeah. It's nuts. And Algiers, like they had this guy. Actually, the way that I ended up like getting connected with them was because there was a guy who was a friend of mine who was actually teaching Maya there, but didn't know Maya. Like he was learning it to teach it all the way. And I was like, what are y'all doing? But they allowed him to do that because he had some teaching certification, which I didn't have. So like suddenly I'm not qualified.
Yeah, that's a big thing too.
Working in this industry for 7 years. So how, that was ridiculous. And I thought it was really a missed opportunity because, you could really, again, it's such a low bar. Like all you need is to be able to have access to this, the software, which they did.
Yeah.
And somebody to kind of guide you, and you really could, you can get into this industry. You don't have to have, a degree. You don't have to have, all you have to have is a skill and connections.
Yeah. Luckily there was an organization called Young Creative Agency that I got to work with a couple times that I taught them, I think Maya. And then when I worked in Baton Rouge, one of my coworkers is a first lady at a Bethel AME. Is that right? And they had computers, and I did a workshop for them. But other than that, it's just like for making my own way in New Orleans before I moved, I was like, well, I should go for profit because going through the education system is not it.
Yeah. It's so like it seems unnecessarily prohibitive.
Yeah. So how was your experience going to SVA? Did you have like culture shock moving from New Orleans to New York City?
Yes. The short answer is yes. So I moved to so again, I graduated high school in 1995, and so and I was really young also. Like I graduated when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
17 in July, and then that September I was gone. Like I left, and my first year was actually at the School of Visual Arts in Savannah, and I chose that because it was cheaper, and I felt like, okay, well, I'll go there first and figure out a way to get to New York, because ultimately I wanted to go to New York. And so I spent my first year, and I think that was kind of a good kind of segue, like being able to like leave home and, you know, be independent, you know, for that first year, my freshman year, before, you know, moving to New York. And so I moved to New York my sophomore year. And yes, it was definitely, definitely a culture shock, but I think I was young enough to adapt. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I grew up, or at least I grew into adulthood in New York. So I always say like I was born and raised in New Orleans, but in a lot of ways I grew up in New York. Because I was so young that like all of my kind of, not formative, but the ways that I grew into adulthood were shaped by my experience, you know, in New York. And but definitely, definitely a shock. I remember just the surroundings, you know, the physical environment of New York. You know, skyscrapers everywhere and people everywhere. And, you know, just the combining of residential and commercial areas was unfamiliar to me. And, you know, just that constant movement, you know, people in the streets en masse at all times of the day and night. You know, it's just a very, very fast paced, very busy. And also just different in terms of, I think because of that environment of living in a crowded city, I think there's, I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. Like people say New Yorkers are mean, but I don't think New Yorkers are mean. I think they live in a city with, you know, millions of other people.
You don't have time to talk to everybody.
You don't have time. You're not going to say how you doing to everybody that you know, that you pass on the street. And you're also not going to, I think there's just a certain distance that you, because you can't keep a physical distance, you know, but there's a certain, like, I guess, you know, there's just a distance.
Yeah.
So I remember when I first moved there, our dorms were on 23rd in Lexington, and I was walking back to the dorm from a bank or from somewhere I was going, and I was coming, or maybe from class, I don't know. And there was a man just like sprawled out on the sidewalk in the middle, and people were stepping over him to walk, you know, and just like, or walking around him. I was like, what is going on? Like, is he dead? Does he need help? You know, it's like nobody seemed to care. So I was like, what, you know, where am I? What is this? And so I went back to the dorm and I told the guy, there was like a doorman, you know, who was, you know, he was there. There was somebody who was there 24/7. It kind of operated like a hotel. It used to be a hotel, that the dorms. And so I told him, I was like, there's a man just laid out on the sidewalk outside. And he was like, oh, okay. Are we gonna do something? He was like, what, do you want to call the police? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do? Like,
nothing, obviously.
There's no urgency, you know. So that stuff like that, I think, definitely a shock. I remember my first time catching the train was scary. Like, I'm like, I don't know. How do you know what stop you're supposed to get off at? Like, what if you miss it? You know, what if everybody seems to know what's going on except for me? You know, and I didn't want to seem like a naive, you know, ignorant person, because I didn't want to get taken advantage of. So I was always like, you know, just kept my poker face no matter what was going on, you know. But yeah, it was just it was definitely different. But I think I
explored New York City, the different parts, or was it just too big?
Ultimately, I did. I think I did through like through school, and through you know, just meeting other people. And I had a cousin who had moved there before I did, which was really good. And she lived in Brooklyn. And it took me a while to like get up the courage to make my way to Brooklyn by myself, you know. But by the time I mean, when I finally did, that was wonderful. It was just because she was really part of like the Black artist scene, you know, in Brooklyn. So she introduced me like to her friend. I became part of her friend group, and, like her community. which was really beautiful. So I got involved, me and her and a few of our other, friends in that community started an organization called Red Clay Arts.
Okay.
Which was based in Brooklyn, and we would put on gallery shows. I actually curated my first, arts exhibition as a part of that. I did a multimedia exhibition that was all about catcalling, which is something that is, at that time at least, I don't know if it is now, but it was.
Yeah, they did a little special on there like a year or two ago.
Say it again?
They did a special on that a year or two ago, so yeah.
Yeah. That was something, I mean, definitely living in New York, because everybody is pedestrian for the most part. So you're always on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And, men just feel like they could tell you whatever, they want to tell you. So I did like this whole kind of multimedia exhibition about that as a part of Red Clay. We would do all kinds of things. It was just a really wonderful time. Really wonderful time.
So through kind of coming into adulthood in New York City, when you came back to New Orleans, like what do you think set you apart from someone who maybe stayed in New Orleans? Like what?
Yeah, I experienced a shock coming back. Also, I was like, this is different. Because I grew up, in New York, I was so young when I moved up there. So, and I lived there from 18 to 28, 20. Yeah. I think I was around 28 or 29, when I moved back home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, wow, there were so many things that were familiar. Like coming back home to live was really nice because it felt like there were so many things that were familiar and so many people who knew me and who knew my family.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was very comfortable, to come back. But at the same time, things don't operate here like they do, in New York. I think there's a sense of like efficiency and urgency around business, is particularly that's in New York. That's really not necessarily here. And I'm not saying that it's better or worse. It's just it's different,
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a struggle. I think public transportation.
Yeah.
Very different.
I tell people when I lived in South Korea, I could get all around the country, but I couldn't figure out how to take a bus from Jefferson Parish to Orange Parish. I was like,
I think, it's not. So when I came back, I was like, okay, I know, I knew we didn't have an efficient public transportation system, but I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll get around. I don't need to buy a car.
Yeah.
Incorrect. So ultimately I ended up, at first I tried to get around on the bus and on my bike. And at the time, like when I moved back home, my daughter was 3, or she made 3 when we moved here.
Mm-hmm.
She was young, and I had like a little, like a trailer on the back of my bike, and I would ride around with her, everywhere like that. And that's hard. Like that's a hard life. So I ended up getting a scooter. I was like, okay, that'll be my kind of the next step, because I didn't want to get a car. I didn't want to produce emissions unnecessarily. I just wanted to have a simpler kind of life. So I said, okay, I'll get a scooter. And so we did that for a while. And then that also became just not practical. And then I got a car after. So now I have an electric car, which is, I feel good about that, But yeah.
You said your daughter made 3, and like just the different ways that people from New Orleans talk. I remember one of my cousins went to Grambling, so he's familiar with like how people from Louisiana talk. And I remember they came to visit, and we were at dinner, and I was like, "Oh, do you want to get to dinner for this time?" And he's like, "It's not 4, it's at." I'm like, "I'm sorry, this is how people talk here," and I was like, I didn't.
I don't think, are we the only people who say that? Who say I want to be here for 3 or 4 weeks?
But I know, like my daughter made 3 is definitely a New Orleans
I know. Yeah, that's
And I
definitely
like I
and
pick and
making
choose.
groceries.
Yeah, I was just like, I can't just start saying that. I'm just gonna go grocery shopping for the rest of my life.
And you know, my mother says like, you know, save the dishes. Save, that means put them away. You know.
Oh wow, I never lived there for 12 years and never heard that one.
Yeah. That also might be a generational thing because I don't hear like a
Yeah.
lot of people in my generation saying that. But my mother would say, save the dishes.
I heard about zinc, but I never heard it in real life until I met an older person in Baton Rouge. Like they
Yeah.
worked in on our floor and we shared the lunch area, and that's the first time I heard zinc in real life. I had only theoretically heard about it.
Yeah. Zinc, orange, you know, Earl, like that's
Yeah, because I lived in New Orleans a little bit when I was younger. So when I came back, I was like, it's Aura, Earl, Turlet,
yes.
Orange.
It's so funny because it's all the OI stuff is but it's like the OR, that's the other. So my grandmother, for instance, she says happy birthday. It's not birthday, it's boy, you know, it's like it's the other way around, you know. So it's Turlet, birthday.
Yeah.
All right, you know.
So like in the past, I don't know if it's still happening, but in the past, 5 years, there's been this like trek of people from Brooklyn to New Orleans. From experiencing Brooklyn, do you understand why? Because for me, I've never lived in New York City. I just went to school with a bunch of New York City people when I went to upstate New York for college. But it seems like New York City is so fast. Like, why do people want to move to New Orleans?
Yeah, I don't even know if I understand the Brooklyn New Orleans connection, but it definitely is there, you know? And I think that a lot of Black folks in the North are generally looking at the South more now.
Yeah.
So not only New Orleans, but also like Atlanta, but I think they're looking at like major cities, you know,
like Dallas and
New Orleans, Atlanta, yeah, Dallas, you know, Houston, places like that. I don't know what it is specifically about Brooklyn and New Orleans, but I definitely met like several people who are from New Orleans who live in Brooklyn, and then vice versa. I don't know. I don't know why.
So with your classes at SVA, like what were all the classes you took? And was it a good experience?
My major, so at SVA, I majored in computer art, which at that time was a very new major.
Okay.
So in a lot of ways, I think they hadn't figured out at that time exactly what what students would need. And so it was obviously very technology focused.
Yeah.
But I think it might have been too technology focused. So I think like it's more important for you to understand that software is a tool.
Yeah.
Versus software is all there is, you know. So we would take, Photoshop classes or like, intro to Maya classes. So where we would learn how to use the tool, but not necessarily what to do with it, you know? So like going through, I don't know, I just felt like it was more technical, more technically focused than skill building. So I learned, I don't know. I think could have done a better job of that. But I think the value of going to that school, and we did take foundational classes. So I did have to take the traditional, drawing, painting. I had to, take all of those classes, which I think was really good. But I think the real value was the name of the school and the connections, that I made there. So because it was a well-known school, and because they were able to bring in faculty who were working in the industry, that was really my first entrance into the industry. So for instance, I had several teachers who worked at Blue Sky. And then also my mentor, my thesis advisor, Danny Williams, was just really, he worked at Blue Sky and was really helpful and supportive. And so like, he's probably the reason that I started working at Blue Sky. And so that was really the value, I think,
So what was turning into your career? Was it just you graduated and then you had connections and you got a job, or what was it?
I think I started, so when I graduated, I think I started working at Nick Digital first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was in school when I was working at Nick Digital. I think my first job out of school was Nick Digital, and that was Nickelodeon's like digital arm. That's what they would do, like a lot of After Effects stuff. They didn't really do any 3D, but it was mostly like After Effects, like promote ads and little short little segments they would do. So I was a PA there, which mostly involved recording. So after the After Effects artists would finish whatever their segment was, they had to render it and put it on tape. At that time, they were still using like beta tapes. So most of my job really was to make sure that happened. It was like, so sometimes that involved like staying after work after everybody had left. Like the After Effects artist might have finished their piece, at the end of the workday. So I had to stay there, and make sure that the thing got to tape, however long, that took. And just doing other things, around this. That was my first job experience. So there's a lot of things that I didn't understand. And I remember once the guy who ran the department, he told me, like there was a computer, I never forget this because it pissed me off so much, but I didn't understand how things worked. And I also was a very literal person. And still to this day, it's like, please speak to me in the words that you really mean. Like I can't figure out the riddles or whatever. I can't, just tell me what you want. So he told me, he was like, oh, there was an old computer in his office. He said, oh, we're going to need to, to box this computer up and send it off. So I thought he meant we, I didn't think that I was supposed to do that by myself. So I'm waiting for him. And also I didn't feel like that was my job as well, but I'm waiting for him to engage me to do it. So eventually he got irritated that I wasn't boxing up this computer. And I was like, I thought we were going to do it. So that was funny. It was really my first work experience. I was what, like 20, I think, when I graduated, 21. I didn't know anything, but that was good. They were really patient with me. And then I kept in touch with Danny. I kept in touch with the folks that I knew at Blue Sky. And I was just really persistent about like, can I take a tour? Can I come up and visit? Can I meet some other people? Like, here's my resume. Here's my reel. And then eventually they told me there was an opening for a production assistant at Blue Sky in the modeling department. And so I, applied for that. And then I started working there. And that was great. That was like a dream come true. That was like, this is all I ever want to do, and I get to do it, so that was really great. And so from being a production assistant, I started just making sure that I was, showing people that I could make models, that I could do it. So then they started giving me like just, little projects to do. Like I remember for Ice Age, I started making the rocks. I would build the rocks, that were in the environment. And, then they eventually just started giving me more, things, and then promoted me to modeler. And so that's kind of how that went.
So did you only work on Ice Age and robots, or?
So I worked on Ice Age 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
I worked with robots, and I worked on Horton Hears a Who. Horton Hears a Who was sort of like my, what do you call it? What's that word? Is it denouement or whatever?
Yeah.
Like
I was actually thinking that, but I was like, is that what she's trying to say?
I think that's the word. So that was sort of like the peak of my career. I actually was able to, because at that time I finally gotten into character modeling.
Okay.
So I built the model for the kangaroo, like the kangaroo mom, and then the Joey, the little baby, And then I also did the mayor's secretary.
Nice.
I made the model for her, and do anybody else. Maybe I did another like minor character. But I was really proud of that because I had spent a long time, like I was doing mostly environmental models prior to that. And so it was really, it felt really good, you know, that they had confidence enough in me, to let me do some character models. And so I learned a lot about like, how to build the model, especially like around the eyes and the mouth, because you have to build it to make sure that it can be animated, and that when the riggers get a hold of it, they can I don't even know the language anymore, but they can build it.
Keep in mind the edge flow and stuff.
Yeah. So it doesn't look crazy, when the mouth opens and closes, when the eyes open and close, and all of that stuff. Like around armpits and things like that. You have to make sure everything is built properly. So that was a really great experience.
Nice. So what do you think drew you to the 3D modeling specifically?
You know what? I don't even know. I don't, I'm trying to remember, like, was it Danny? Was it Danny specifically, or was it like, I don't know. I can't think of like that moment when I was like, oh, I want to be a modeler.
Right.
I don't remember. I mean, it was so long ago. But I know that I liked modeling more because I felt like I could take more time. It felt like being a sculptor, I could really take more time and like really like develop what this character looks like. I just enjoyed that more. Animation just seemed so tedious.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that, So
yeah, I always say like all animation is tedious. Is like, what tediousness do you want to deal with? And I love the tediousness of 3D modeling and like pulling and pushing vertices.
Yeah, I could pull and push points all day, but I didn't want to. I don't know, something about I just didn't want to be an animator.
Yeah, I just could never push the character enough. It's like every time I finished the assignment, I was like, I could have did more. So can you talk about the Backyard Gardeners Network and like your various initiatives?
Okay, yeah, we can talk about that too. So when I moved back to New Orleans after Katrina, I was looking for ways to be of service, or I wanted to be able to be a contribution to my community, to the Lower Ninth Ward. I bought a house in New Orleans a month before Katrina hit. I wanted to, it was going to be an investment property, and I thought eventually, I would move back home, but I didn't know when. And then Katrina hit, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to go home. So when I got back, I started working on my house because I knew one thing I wanted to do. I spent so long just working in this virtual digital space. I wanted to do something real. Like I wanted to know that I could build things with my hands, for instance, or I could like grow my own food, or like, I could do things, real things, for myself. And so I started working on my house and kind of looking for what I could do in my community, started going to community meetings and, things like that. And then kind of looked at community gardening as a way to like revitalize, like visually revitalize the area, make spaces more useful. Again, build on like this idea of self-reliance, build on the cultural heritage of, the Lower Ninth Ward. There's so many Black folks who moved into the Lower Nine and basically became homesteaders. Like if you think about it, like in my grandparents' generation, or maybe my great-grandparents' generation, moved to the Lower Nine and built their own houses from the ground up, and then kept like chickens and pigs, and had things growing in the backyard. My uncle told me when I was doing, I did like this oral history project with, or I led this oral history project with some of the young people who were working with us at the time, where we interviewed, Lower Nine natives about what it was like growing up and like their connection with growing food. And I remember my uncle was one of the people that we interviewed, and he said that when they were kids, they didn't go to the candy store. You know, there was fruit everywhere. There was like get blackberries off the blackberry vines, or you know, whatever, figs, you know, whatever else was growing around. They just go around the neighborhood and eat that. And so that was really that to me is like part of a rich cultural history that is a resource. And you know, after Katrina, there was so much lack, or this, you know, and it's easy to you kind of victimize people or see people as victims. And in the lower nine, like the community did need a lot of help, need a lot of support, but they weren't helpless. You know, like we did have, you know, resources, and I think culture is a strong resource. And so I wanted to do something that could like bring people together around something that we're familiar with. And then also highlight this really strong cultural resource that is that's also about self-reliance. And so which ties into, you know, what do you do after a disaster hits? You know, it's better if you do have, you know, things that you can it's better if you're more self-reliant, you know, if you have things that you can rebuild after a disaster strikes, and you can feed yourself. So that's why I started. So I started Backyard Gardeners Network around that idea, and started officially in 2009. And we have 2 community gardens now. That one of them has operated as an open air community center. We would do all kinds of like events and workshops and activities for all ages, for children, adults, and seniors. We ran a youth internship program out of it, which was paid, you know, for kids between ages of 14 and 19. We did a food as medicine workshop series. It's all about health and nutrition geared towards adults and seniors. They would actually cook at the garden, which was, you know, really amazing. Then we'd have a kids club that would happen on Saturdays where kids could come to the garden and do like gardening activities and art and cooking, and sometimes like environmental awareness activities. So we really had a lot going on, more than we could handle. And so ultimately that wasn't sustainable, but I think we had a good run. And so Backyard Gardeners Network is still around now, but we just manage the 2 community gardens, and there's I think maybe about 13 gardeners total. I think, which is really good.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, during my time as president of the Herbally Young Professionals, it would have been cool to like know about your organization and team up. I was all about collaboration, but there's just so many things going on in New Orleans.
There's a lot.
What made you decide to get a master's of sustainable real estate development?
So I decided to go back to school in 2015. I think I went back in 2015, graduated in 2016. It was an 18-month program. I was at a point in my life where I was kind of questioning my life decisions. You know, I you know, quit this really well-paying job, you know, in New York, and moved back to New Orleans without a plan, you know, what I was going to do, and kind of you know, found essentially a passion project, which was Backyard Gardeners Network, and really put like 1,000% of my energy and efforts into that, into building that. But I really didn't know, you know, what it took to successfully run a nonprofit organization. And we did a lot, and so we did a lot of great programming. But you know, ultimately, I was not successful in bringing in the amount of money and creating like a really solid organizational structure, you know, to keep growing and to keep the organization going in the direction where it could be sustainable, and where it could pay me a salary that I could live on and pay other people, you know. So I was questioning, like, what am I doing? Like, this is not, you know, I can't I need to pay my bills. You know, I have a daughter, you know, like this is not healthy. I can't continue, you know, living like this.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that I wanted my work, you know, to mean something, you know, to me and to, you know, to have an impact on my community. And maybe I think in 2014, I was working with the Center of Sustainable Engagement and Development, which is a nonprofit in the Lower Ninth Ward that focuses on environmental issues,
Mm-hmm.
around looking at food access.
Mm-hmm.
Lower Ninth Ward. The Lower Ninth Ward is a neighborhood that lacks a number of amenities, but most importantly, doesn't have a grocery store. So we don't have proper food access. And at the time, you know, the closest grocery store was a Walmart in St. Bernard Parish, which is like you were mentioning earlier about the public transportation system. You know, if you were trying to use public transportation to get from where we live in Orleans Parish to St. Bernard Parish, that's going to be challenging. And so we were looking at, you know, why the neighborhood doesn't have proper food access and what are alternatives, what are things that we could do about it. And so that really started piquing my interest in development, because I wanted to understand how real estate development works. Like why do these developers and grocery store operators keep saying the numbers don't work? You know, what are numbers? You know, what do they mean? What do they need to be in order for, you know, a project like this to work? And I saw it also as kind of a continuation of essentially land work, because with Backyard Gardeners Network, that's about, you know, unlocking the value of land and using it, you know, making it something that's beneficial to the, you know, the larger community. So I feel like this, you know, real estate development work is the same thing, looking at what is the value of land and, you know, how can it be beneficial to, you know, to the larger community. So I was drawn to sustainable real estate development, not only because, you know, sustainable is a word that's thrown around a lot, but the sustainability focus in that program at Tulane was kind of a mix of like environmental sustainability. So like green, quote unquote, green practices that we can use in, you know, in construction and in real estate development that are going to be better for our environment. But then also like, you know, social justice, you know, sustainability as well. So with real estate development in our capitalist, you know, system, there's this term that's thrown around a lot called highest and best use. And so highest and best use in capitalism usually means, how can I make the most money? How can I draw the most profit out of this piece of land? But when you look at it from, you know, a social justice sustainability lens, you're also looking at, well, what's best, you know, for our people, for the people who are here, you know, going to have the most social value. And so I was drawn to that, you know, as well. And so through that program, we learned a lot. You know, there were instructors who were, you know, made sure that we were having conversations about redlining and what that did to, you know, various communities, and why, you know, kind of why our landscape looks the way it looks now in terms of where people, you know, where people can live. Why, not even why communities are still segregated, but also why poor neighborhoods in urban areas are generally Black. And why, you know, just like sort of why things look the way they look. And, you know, why things are the way they are, what sort of the overlay of racism you know, for real estate development, racism, which pervades everything, you know, in our lives and in our system, but how would impact, what that looked like and what that looked like in, you know, in real estate development. So I think that was really valuable. And it sort of helped me to kind of hone in on what I really was interested in, which was, you know, collective investment, ways that people in communities could invest collectively in order to create the types of developments that we want in our, you know, in our neighborhoods. And so that's something that continues to be an interest of mine and something that I'm building,
Yeah.
towards as I gain more. Now that I'm working in real estate development, I work for an affordable housing development now, a nonprofit. And so as I gain my skills, I'm looking at, okay, how do I use that to create this, a collective investment model here?
Yeah. Yeah, that conversation around like putting a grocery store is so annoying because it's like it's so expensive to be poor, first of all. So to travel to all these other places to get it, and then you're probably getting your food from a corner store, which is marked up. So you're spending the money anyway, and it's a necessity. Like, and so I was in the New Orleans Economic Development Ambassador Program. And I remember in my cohort, there's this dude, and he's like one of them people who is like only Hispanic in name, like not in culture at all. Like he was a white dude. But anyway, so they were talking about how hard it was to get the Rouses. Like there's like a different kind of Rouses somewhere in New Orleans. It's not their usual model, but it was like a smaller version.
Okay.
And he was like playing devil's advocate, and I'm like, how are you playing devil's advocate on a grocery store? Like that is not what. I'm like, people need food. What are you doing? So
yeah, but I mean, so many of the decisions that are made in a capitalist structure are not about what people's social needs are. Need is defined by what people are willing to pay for. So if you don't have a lot of money, your needs aren't really, considered as much. And then also there's this perception too, like also racist ideas about people, always seep into all decisions that are made as well. So when operators and developers are looking at putting a grocery store in a neighborhood like the Lower Ninth Ward, which is largely Black and poor, working class, they make assumptions that the store is going to there's going to be theft, or maybe they can't afford that, or people are not going to to take care of the property, and how do they they mitigate that, or people don't have enough money to buy certain products, and so those racist ideas also are part of the the equation as well.
Yeah. So no matter what you're doing, you're fulfilling your first name, which means to build in Swahili. From 3D modeling to building communities, what are the various ways you express your need to build in your life? Like, what ways do you express your creativity?
Yeah, and also now I'm a carpenter. Like,
nice.
I do actual building as well. So like I'm working on a chifforobe for my daughter. A chifforobe is like a wardrobe. It's on one side you can hang clothes, and the other side has drawers.
Yep.
So I've been working on that for a while, because I kind of had a break where I couldn't work on it, and now I'm back, trying to like finish it up so she could have extra space for her clothes. I really started to get into that. I really like working with my hands. I like building things.
Yeah.
They named me right, I like just being able to be self-sufficient and to be able to make things out of other stuff, I guess. I always say power tools are a girl's best friend. I'm like, keep your diamonds, give me a saw, give me a drill. I'll do something with that,
Yeah.
I really like, what they allow me to be able to do and to be able to create. Like the desk that you can't see it obviously, but the desk that my computer is on, it was really simple, very simple design, but I built that. It's like I like to solve problems. So the problem in my living room was that, like, especially when we first when the pandemic first happened and we all had to go and work from home, our workspace at home was really not conducive to like working for a long time. Like, I had a computer on this like tiny little desk. That's fine for like checking your email every once in a while, or like watching a movie, but it wasn't conducive to like sitting down, and I didn't have enough space. So I decided to build something that was going to work for me, and for my daughter. And so I was really proud, that I was able to do that. And I built something. I built a desk that sort of fits into like this built-in bookshelf that I already have.
Nice.
It has a sliding keyboard tray, underneath it, so that you can like push it away when you're not using it, and then you pull it out when you need it. So I like that. I like problem solving. I like figuring out how to how to make things that that fit my needs. But I'm not a stuff person. I don't like to have like a lot of, not a materialist. I don't like to have like a lot of things.
Yeah.
Behind, though it doesn't really look like that back here, but I'm trying to get rid of stuff. But yeah, I really I like to have, to be able to have what I need, and like to be able to make things that work for what my needs are.
Yeah, I always said if I had like multiple lifetimes, I'd have become an electrician and a carpenter, or like a cabinet maker.
Yeah.
Which, I'll do that one day, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, but hopefully you have a long life and you can do a number of those things.
Yeah. Okay. So in your short career as in animation, did you ever experience anything from being a black woman, or any other isms like?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I experienced was more like isolation than anything. I didn't experience any that I was aware of, any sort of like I guess stereotypical like direct, racist thing. Nobody put a noose on my desk, or like crazy stuff like that. I was very, fortunate to be in a really welcoming environment. People, I like those, creative spaces where, people, you could wear whatever you wanted to wear to work. As long as you got the job done, that's really what mattered. Nobody was keeping tabs on when you came in and when you left, and any of that. It was just like getting your work done. My coworkers' cubicles were filled with like toys and different things. I had a coworker who would like come to work. He was like, he probably would describe himself differently, but I'm just going to say this because I think it's a word that everybody is familiar with. So he was like goth, but also like he was kind of like obsessed with the undead and like all of that. So he would come to work like dressed like a zombie sometimes, It was like that type of environment, but he was super into bird watching. So he was like, it was just like these interesting people. Like I went to, one of my coworkers was a b-boy who was like really into like breakdancing. He taught a breakdancing class like at work.
Nice.
And there was a time that I had I used to wear my hair really short, like a buzz cut almost. And like he would shave like designs into the side of my head at work. So inappropriate. But we didn't know, that's the only type of environment I had ever worked in. So nothing seemed wrong with it to me,
Right.
It was like, so that's the type of stuff that we would do. And I thought that was great. So, but just in terms of like, I was the only Black woman certainly in my department. And I'm trying to think, I think when we were talking earlier, it was like on the creative side of the company. I think, like, I don't want anybody to watch this and be like, no, I wasn't. I was there. I don't remember. It was so long ago, but I feel like I remember I was the only Black woman in any of the creative departments. Most of the Black people, I might have been the only Black. Danny is Black. Danny's mother is Black, so he was there. But I don't think there were any other. There might have been a couple of Black folks in animation. Let me not. That's the wrong thing. But most of the Black people worked in like, the administrative department, like accounting, or they might have worked in IT, or stuff like that. So I think it was kind of isolating, in that respect. And But you know, I wish they were. I didn't want to be the only one. You know, I wanted to have other, you know, other Black women, other Black people, you know, in our department.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my experience, and I think that probably is one reason why maybe it was easier for me to leave when I was ready. You know, not to say that I didn't, you know, form friendships, you know, and things like that. Though I honestly I have some regrets about not forming closer friendships with the people that I worked with. But I kind of was like, I'm with y'all all day. Like I don't want to also be with you after work, you know?
Right.
So, but I probably should have, because they were really good people.
Yeah.
And, really interesting people too. But I had this whole other life, like this whole other life in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
That was not related at all, you know, to what I was doing in, you know, at Blue Sky. So it was, for me, I think I needed to have that balance. And that life was that was Black. That was my, that was my community.
So do you ever have any desires to get back to 3D? No.
It's so interesting how, like, you know, it's like when I'm done, I'm done. You know, like I think really the only regrets I have about leaving is the way that I left people, you know. So I keep in touch with some of my former coworkers via social media. But I don't really maintain, you know, strong like connections with people. And I definitely regret that, because again, a lot of good people, including Danny. Like I will never forget Danny. Danny Williams is just a great person. And every time we talk, you know, he always like expresses appreciation for me. I always express appreciation for him. It's like this kind of mutual like admiration that, you know, I just have high respect for him. But I really wish, you know, I could have done better just with, you know, keeping in touch, you know, with people. But I don't really miss the work. You know, I miss the environment, you know, like being surrounded by so many creative people. I mean, these were people, I think I definitely took it for granted. These were like the best of the industry. You know, I was surrounded by really, really talented people who loved what they did. And I didn't realize that that was unique. You know, I didn't realize that that was a special thing. Yeah. I liked that we got free DVDs. because Blue Sky was in the Academy, you know, so we would get like, you know, Academy screeners. And so like little perks like that, you know, and like the company parties that they would, you know, throw, those were fun. And, you know, I miss kind of that. But the actual, like sitting at a computer for 10 hours, you know, pushing and pulling points, you know, I could do without that. I don't need, you know, to do that. I realized that when I was working there, that was another reason why it was easy for me to leave. I realized that wasn't my passion, because a lot of my coworkers would leave work and go home and work on their own projects. And I felt like the last thing I wanted to do when I went home was to get back on the computer and do more of this stuff, you know? So I was able to, I can be, and especially more when I was younger, I could be very critical of myself, you know, and very kind of like, I had this idea in my mind that I was a high achiever, you know, and so I was successful in whatever I did, I was the best. That was the perception I had of myself in my head. And I just had to come to a point with this career where I was like, that's not going to be it for me. I don't want to go the extra mile to, you know, to be the best area. So, you know, I kind of had to come to grips with that and let it go. Yeah. And Katrina was, I think, presented an opportunity for me to really, you know, to kind of like cut that off and move on to something else. Yeah.
So my last question is, if someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight in your life outside of your? The question is usually outside of your work in animation, but Yeah, most of your life is outside of animation.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
So, but what you want highlighted in a documentary about
I
yourself?
knew you were going to ask a question like that. I have to think about that. You know what? So when I was growing up, I always wanted, like, I was always drawn to life stories that were varied. You know, like I never wanted to be a person who worked or at the same place for all my life, or even worked in the same industry all my life. I remember, like, I was always interested and attracted to people who did a variety of things. You know, I feel like we only have one life. You know, why just do one thing? Stay in one place. You know, so I think maybe that's what I would want the focus to be. I want maybe the theme is she really tried. You know, like she tried out different things in life. You know, she tried to make an impact in different ways. You know,
and then at the end of your documentary, it could be, and she succeeded.
I like to think I succeeded in some things, maybe, but mostly I tried. You know, I think, you know, with Blue Sky, Red Clay, I'm really proud of the work that I did with Red Clay in New York, Backyard Gardeners Network down here, and then, you know, shifting to real estate development and working in affordable housing, and just really like trying on new things and seeing, you know, where I can go and, you know, how I can make an impact. I think that's something that's always been important to me, like just wanting to make an impact, wanting to make life better, particularly for Black people, before, you know, for people, for human beings, you know, in general.
Yeah. So where can people follow you on social media?
So my personal Instagram is Jenga Builds. Is it? Wait, I haven't been. Honestly, I haven't been on. Is it, Deborah? Because I think that's how you communicate with me. I took like a social media break. You know, so I haven't been on since I had the car accident. You know, I haven't really been on. So I think I'm pretty sure it's Jenga Builds, and I post there occasionally, but you know, not a whole lot. And a lot of my posts are around like gardening, you know, things that I'm growing or what I'm building, you know, what I'm working on, or, you know, just different random things like that. So, and then also my Backyard Gardeners Network is at BlkWmnAnimator. That's a really interesting, again, you know, just kind of, I post occasionally there. I'm a child of the 80s, so I don't really, you know, it's like social media seems like an extra job to me.
Yeah, it is, particularly Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not even on Twitter. That's too
Most
much.
people aren't.
Instagram, I technically have a Facebook page, but I don't think I posted on that in like a couple of years. So, you know, but yeah, that's where people can find me. And yeah, I think I'm a pretty open and welcoming person. So they can feel free to reach out to me as well.
Well, Jenga, thank you for coming on this platform and telling your story. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. This was a fun conversation, and I hope that it, you know, maybe helps some people who are thinking about getting into the industry. And yeah, thank you.
So to everyone out there, I want you to like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Seal the Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal, and I'll see you in the next video.